Hey guys, it's Celestia, and today's topic is one that's been a briefly discussed point of contention in quite a few of my past videos now, as well as the art community as a whole, and it's the separation of art from artist. The issue usually arises in times of controversy. When an artist does something bad, does it then make you bad for enjoying their art? Should you be able to enjoy an artist's work separately from them and what they've done? Or should their art be shunned even when it itself is not problematic, because of something the artist has done? Is it even possible to thoroughly separate an artist from their art, regardless of whether or not we should? I can't promise you any definitive answers to those questions, but I will at least be going over some of the more thought-provoking, often very opposing opinions on the topic and why people believe them throughout today's video. Also, since a lot of you being unable to skip to a timestamp without demanding to speak to my manager in the comments is a recurring problem at this point, I'm going to be saving this month's contest update until the end of the video, but SPEEDPAINT is sponsoring August's contest and providing 2 prizes this month, so I would encourage you to stick around and watch this section at the end, because the first place winner will get an SPEEDPAINT Deco MW drawing tablet, and the second place winner will get an SPEEDPAINT Deco Fun XS drawing tablet. So you have double the chance to win this month if you listen to the outro and learn how to enter. Now, in terms of the topic itself, there's a lot to unpack, and that's partially because the entire issue of whether or not we should, or even can, separate the art from the artist is one that's been discussed for hundreds of years. And while no one has ever been able to determine a concrete answer throughout all of that time, it has nonetheless yielded some very well-rounded and educated stances on every side. Unfortunately, while it used to be a topic that was debated by scholars in relatively good faith, it has now largely become sensationalized, over-dramatized Twitter fodder, wielded by the art community as a weapon with which to promote cancel culture. The entire issue has become one of 2 things, depending on which side of it you're on. A way for you to justify supporting artists who have done horrible things and absolve yourself from any moral blame for doing so, or a way to over-police the morality of art and attack others for liking something that you don't think they should. As with most things these days, it's become more of an issue of extremism than anything else. People are viewing this as black and white with one objective answer, when the entire problem is based in the grays of nuance and situational context, and neither are being considered. So my goal here is to share all of the biggest and most common black and white takes, all of the gray nuance prompting them, and some thoroughly opinion-based conclusions from me, based on both. To do so, I'll be splitting this video into 4 sections. Why people think we should separate art from artist, why people think we shouldn't separate art from artist, whether or not we even can, one way or the other, and my final thoughts about it all. Before I do though, there's some context that I'd like to elaborate upon, specifically pertaining to the origin of that separation. I asked those of you who follow me on Twitter for your opinions on this issue before I scripted the video, and there are quite a few opinions you gave on it that I will reference throughout it. But there's one person in particular who provided a specific perspective that I had not considered at all beforehand via DMs, the historical one. Misu2002 sent me a really helpful article that I'll be referencing throughout this analysis, which is also linked in the description, and it explains, amongst a litany of other super helpful and insightful points, how this whole issue started. Because in the beginning, this wasn't about whether or not it was morally okay to like the art of an asshole artist. It was about evaluating the art itself, which to some extent is a perspective that I believe should still be maintained. The whole practice began in the early 20th century when new criticism, capitalized for those of you who can't see my script, which is all of you, was developed as one of the major critical tools of art, mostly literary art, in its time period. The intention behind the development of new criticism was to elevate the evaluation and appreciation of art to a science. And to do so, they posited a method of evaluation based on whether or not art had value on its own, independent from its creator. And I don't just mean that they were like, I don't care who made this, I'm gonna judge it based on its own merit. I mean that they looked at it and thought, if I can sense any semblance of the artist's identity in this work, the artist has failed. It is only truly good if I can't tell who made it. They didn't just want to separate art from artists, they wanted the art to stand on its own. They didn't want people saying, it's good because Picasso made it. They wanted people to say, this is good, and then learn that Picasso made it. Of course, there are significant differences in that capacity, because Picasso's style would lead one to recognize his work just by looking at it, putting him at a significant disadvantage if held to that criteria, which subsequently illustrates a prime example of how this does not equally or seamlessly translate to visual art. But it is nonetheless how the whole thing started. To my understanding, the first recorded debate surrounding the separation of art from artist was prompted by new criticism. And while I realize that its correlation to visual art is not as straightforward as its intended purpose of evaluating written art, I still think it's worth mentioning, because this whole thing started with critics wanting to appreciate art based on its merit alone, as I understand it, which is the complete opposite reason of why we're trying to separate it now. Not because the artist was being criticized and subsequently dealing with their completely unrelated work being demonized as a result, but because the artist was being praised and their work was therefore being commended despite the fact that if it weren't known as being theirs, it might not be nearly as impressive. Which I actually find really fascinating, because it shows that the separation of art from artist is more complex than just morality. It's about the viewer's perception and interpretation too. Nonetheless, new criticism is not the only way that art is held to separate scrutiny from its creator, and it is also, in my opinion, the worst extreme compared to its counterpart, postmodernist beliefs, primarily those coined by Barthes. I find Barthes' beliefs to be much more reasonable, simply because I do not believe in black and white viewpoints to any objective or quantitative degree, but that does not matter at all because I haven't explained it yet. Basically, postmodernists do also believe, just like new critics, that art should be separate from artist, but they believe it for different reasons. Roland Barthes, in 1967, argued that the artist's intention in making a piece of art is entirely irrelevant. The only thing that actually matters, to him, is how the viewer interprets that art. For example, consider a piece of abstract art. The artist makes a piece depicting a black square on a white background. They intend it to depict their experience with social isolation during the 2020 health experience. Thanks, YouTube. One viewer sees it and understands it as a depiction of their distance from other people throughout their life, resulting from bullying and mental illness. Another viewer sees it as a depiction of their experience as a minority. Another viewer sees it as a depiction of being forced into a cookie-cutter version of themselves for society. Another viewer sees it as nothing more than a visual contrast between extremes. Based on Barthes' method of evaluation, all of those viewers are correct, and the artist's own views are irrelevant, because the person looking at the art is the one who creates its meaning. As he said, there is no specific meaning, there is no truth, there is nothing to understand. The role of the reader and the role of the text are as co-creators of meaning. I bring all of this context up because, in my opinion, it's relevant when considering the role of the artist in their art in any situation. Yes, this context pertains specifically to a more analytical, scholarly perspective on the matter, being that it's about evaluating the art's merit, not its morality. But I don't think the method by which they're evaluated is entirely irrelevant here. It's clear that historically, the role of the artist in their art has always been hotly debated, with no objectively accepted consensus. And even in the context of the article I'm referencing, no agreement was reached. The writer consulted 3 separate literary critics, and none of them could wholeheartedly agree on the extent to which an artist could be separated from their work. All said that they drew from both new criticism and postmodernism when constructing their views on the issue, but they also said that they didn't think it was necessary or pertinent to draw a divisive line between art and artist. So if these practiced professional scholars couldn't agree on any consistent stance on the matter, how are we supposed to? Especially when it's grown to encompass much larger, wider-reaching issues as a result of cancel culture. We're not. We don't know Welcome to the video. That's right, this was just the fucking intro. We haven't even started to dive into how this impacts the modern art community yet. But don't worry, I'm about to tell you why your problematic artist fave is totally within their rights to keep making money from their art that's being supported by millions. Or why they're not. I need a vacation. All relevant context in mind, let's start here. Why do people think that art should be judged and appreciated separately from its artist? There are a lot of different reasons, which is going to be a recurring theme in this video, but I'll try to summarize them all as best as I can. First, many who support this mentality do so because of one very reasonable, accurate belief, that bad people can make good art, and that their art being good does not make them good, just as their art being bad would not make them bad. This mentality is largely only applicable when an artist's work does not depict any of the problematic views that they may be accused of holding, which is a topic I'll be returning to in more detail later. But in this case, let's assume that the art in question doesn't. It doesn't depict anything bad that the artist has done or reflect any of their views. People in favor of separating art from artist believe that in that case, since the art itself doesn't depict the things that the artist is facing criticism or scrutiny for, the art should be able to be enjoyed independently from the artist. Furthermore, they posit that the over-policing and over-moralization of art and artists is actually harmful to the art community as a whole, because it results in one primary dilemma, that completely harmful harmless art is deemed as bad because the person who made it is. It yields itself to an even more questionable precedent. Can we only enjoy art that's made by artists we consider to be good people? And if the definition of good or bad morally is so inevitably unquantifiable and nebulous, can we enjoy any art at all, since we can't objectively define an artist's morality one way or the other? Like, do I have to stop liking Gudetama or My Melody because Sanrio did bad things? I don't know if Sanrio has done bad things, but it's 2 in the morning as of writing this, and I'm just gonna assume with limited brain power that they, as a very profitable corporation, have done some shitty things. The point remains. If a completely unproblematic artist drew an equally lethargic, depressed, apathetic, anthropomorphic egg, I would like it just as much as Gudetama, without the label of it being Gudetama. So does me liking Gudetama mean I support Sanrio, or does it mean I vibe with this egg not wanting to get out of bed? Regardless, though, problems begin to arise when the artist's art depicts their views. For example, consider 2 artists. Both are known to be misogynistic, both are artists who draw women. Only one of them depicts women as lesser than men. People who prefer to separate art from artist would believe that only the one depicting women as lesser than men in their work deserves to be demonized for it, despite them sharing the same views, because they believe that their work should be judged separately from their beliefs. And in this case, I don't personally believe that to be incorrect, because even if you separate an artist from their work, so long as you're still judging it critically, you should still be able to notice the same flaws. Even if you didn't know the artist was sexist, if their work depicts women in a sexist way, you'll still notice that and be able to say, oh, gross, I don't want to support or consume that. Like, if the artist's work does reflect their views, you should still be able to judge it independently from the artist and say, I don't agree with this, I think it's harmful, whether you know anything about the artist or not. So I feel like it's worth mentioning in this section that when people say that no matter what an artist did, their art should still be judged separately from them, I don't think the majority of people are disregarding or trivializing what the artist may have done. I think they're just trying to say, the artist has this horrible view, but it isn't shown in their work, so enjoying that work isn't bad. Or, the artist has this horrible view and it is shown in their work, therefore I enjoy neither, but I came to that conclusion by evaluating both separately. Judging art and artists separately does, objectively, still allow the consumer to question and evaluate the morality of both. So I don't think it's in good faith to assume that the consumer is automatically enabling the problematic behavior or beliefs of an artist because they enjoy their art. Anyway, furthermore, people who believe in the separation of art from artist also believe that when people fail to separate the two, nobody feels able to enjoy anything without empirically and quantifiably being able to assert that the person who made the thing is a good person, which is more than fair. It's not even possible to determine whether an artist is good or bad morally based on any universally agreed upon criteria. So if we can only like art if it's made by an artist who's a good person, we could quite possibly not be able to blamelessly enjoy any art at all whatsoever. Others feel that this whole over-policing of the support of potentially problematic artists is just a way to justify their own dislike of certain art. For instance, I recently made a video discussing why people dislike Boyfriends, a comic on Webtoon, and although there were some very real issues surrounding the whole controversy, I heard a lot of feedback reflecting the same thing, that people didn't like the comic, and that because they didn't like the comic, they then felt the need to come up with a plethora of morality-based reasons not to. Because in 2022, you can't say you don't like a piece of art without someone coming after you for being some kind of unwarranted hater. So you have to have some kind of moral reason to justify not enjoying it. And the artist who made it, being bad in some way, often tends to be the scapegoat in that case. You're not allowed to like the art because the artist did a bad thing. Therefore, it's okay to dislike it, despite the fact that it was always okay to dislike it just because you dislike it. I'm not trying to say that the things the creator of Boyfriends did are fine, and therefore the comic is, just like I went over in that video, which I encourage you to watch if you're curious or confused. But I am saying that a lot of people just didn't like the way it was written, and therefore felt the need to hide behind artists did bad things as a reason to say art is bad, which many believe to be a false and faulty mentality. So those are the main reasons that people think that art should be separated from artist. Now, let's talk about the reasons that people think it shouldn't. And first and foremost, it comes down to the most infuriatingly unavoidable aspect: endorsement. Because you can rarely enjoy an artist's work without supporting them in some way. And supporting an artist who does or believes reprehensible things is, obviously, bad. So people who argue in favor of not separating art and artist often do so for that reason. Because whether the artist's work depicts their views or not, enjoying their work anyway almost always means supporting them in some way that benefits them, be it financially or by giving them encouragement, a career, or a platform. Many people who discourage the separation of art and artist don't do so because they think that the artist's work is as problematic as their views or behavior. In fact, many recognize that the art itself is not bad at all, but is only made bad by the context of the artist's actions. They only find it detrimental to support the artist anyway, because doing so enables that artist to continue to spread the harm they were already spreading, even if they weren't doing so through their art. Which then, of course, begs the question, what is the role of the consumer here? Is it our job as people who like art to question the morality and character of the artists who create it? Or can we just enjoy it? Can we just like art? Or should we be considered morally blameworthy for enabling problematic artists to grow bigger platforms and make more money because we continue to consume their content? People in this category would, likely, tend to agree more with the latter, and that's more than fair. The decision as to what art gets to reach a larger audience is, for the most part, in the hands of people who consume it. And if we choose not to make any moral judgment as to who should be able to make it, we are, consciously or unconsciously, enabling the toxic and detrimental behaviors of the problematic artists whose art, blameless or not, is popular. As Kylie18 on Picstory says, the problem may not be present in the art, but the art comes from the person. Media consumption, like anything else, should be mindful and intentional. We need to look at the people who are at the head of the table and the people who don't yet have a seat, and consider how our consumption impacts that. But what if liking the work of a problematic artist doesn't give them support? I mean, I love Harry Potter, but I find J.K. Rowling to be a reprehensible, contemptible, disgusting human being. And that's why when I watch her movies, I watch them on a set of DVDs my mom bought me when I was like 8, and not on a streaming service that gives her pay-per-view revenue. Most people feel that enjoying the art of an artist who does or believes bad things is not, in and of itself, a bad thing, so long as you're not supporting that artist, which is reflected by the responses I got on Twitter. That is not, however, to say that everyone makes this differentiation, as made evident by the appalling number of messages I received after my boyfriend's video saying, "If you like the comic after what the creator did, you're garbage and I hope you die, it doesn't matter what's in the comic," which is a sentiment that's shared by a lot of people who, whether they intend to or not, are using this entire debate as an excuse to over-police and excessively moralize art, even if their intentions are largely positive. That's not the only reason that people don't want to separate art from artists, though, because just like I explained in the intro, this issue is more nuanced than just the morality of it. We also have to consider the artistic evaluation of the work being created. If we start looking at every piece of art as something that's entirely independent from the artist that made it, we are inherently doing a disservice to both the art and the artist, at least in the opinion of those who disagree with the views of new critics and postmodernists, because then we disregard the context of the piece's creation. And there are some instances in which doing so is genuinely harmful, because while most people look at this in the context of the artist did a bad thing so their art is bad, there is also the lesser discussed context of the artist did a good thing so their bad art is good. Or the artist went through this particular struggle, therefore their work could benefit from being viewed through that perspective. For example, Frida Kahlo and Nina Simone are artists whose work was heavily impacted and influenced by their culture and experiences as Mexican and Black women, respectively, and to separate their work from the things that they lived through that prompted and inspired it would be detrimental and reductive. Finally, there's one more point in this section that I'd like to address, and while it's also about the context of the artist's character being applied to their work, it isn't specifically about the nature of it. What I mean is, for example, that Edgar Degas's work is beautiful. Him being a misogynistic piece of shit who referred to women as human animals and chose to be an incel because sexually interacting with them would lessen the quality of his work does not diminish the fact that his work was beautiful. But it does bring context, and it's context worth considering. Some people who want art to be judged alongside its artist want that because of that context. Not because the art would be bad on its own, but because based on the artist's ideologies, it may actually endorse harmful ideologies in and of itself. What I mean is that I really liked Degas's work, and then I researched him for this video. And now I'm sitting here wondering how many of the underage girls he used as subjects consented to him doing so, or how favorably he really depicted them, or whether or not he was actually just depicting the human form as it was, like he claimed, or if he was coercing the subjects that he was depicting into particular situations or positions so that he could depict them that way. For clarity's sake, here's another example, J.K. Rowling. If I didn't know anything about her, I would look at Harry Potter and think, this is the art of someone who's from a different generation, in which LGBTQ representation was vastly less normalized, and that's why it's so lacking in this media. But because I know that J.K. Rowling is transphobic, I am now in a position to put that under more scrutiny. Was it really just because of cultural generational dissonance, or was it because she's transphobic? Many people with this perspective believe that to thoroughly divorce art from artist can be harmful in its removal of context, because the artist's views might mean that the consumer should pay closer attention to the implications of their art than they would if the artist didn't hold them in the first place. As Constance Grady from Vox says, the issue here is not just, is this art monstrous, but is this work of art asking me, as a reader, to be complicit with the artist's monstrosity? It's the same argument that has come up repeatedly with R. Kelly, who writes songs about sex and consent and age differences between lovers, and who has also been accused of sexually assaulting very young women and girls. But next, let's move on to the overarching question looming over this entire discussion, regardless of all of that. Can we separate art from artist, whether we should or not? That's a hard question to answer. That's actually an impossible question to answer, like literally every single one so far, but that's what we do on this channel. Ask impossible questions and give absolutely zero concrete answers, because life is chaos, and almost everything valuable is up to the interpretation of individual opinions and not fact. Hence why we're constantly kicking each other's asses over the slightest disagreements. But let's start with the sources of those disagreements, and you can come kick my ass over them later. First, the most obvious, as we've discussed so far. On a strictly logistical level, is it possible to separate art from artist? Well, many would say yes. If your enjoyment of an artist's work does not give them any kind of financial support, you are subsequently separating your enjoyment of the art from any support for the artist. Me rewatching Harry Potter movies on DVDs that are older than half my audience is not financially supporting J.K. Rowling, but I'm still here on my channel talking about Harry Potter, and if I were doing so without acknowledging the harm that Rowling has done, I would still be supporting her even if I wasn't doing so financially, because as many have said, that is not the only way that these problematic artists need or receive support. J.K. Rowling probably doesn't need the fucking 30 cents she would get from me streaming her movie. What she does need is for people to keep talking about that movie, which is why I wouldn't be if it weren't for the particularly hard-hitting and relevant example that it is. Oftentimes, financially supporting an artist by enjoying their work is only one small part of actually supporting them, and when they're already quite successful, it might not even be necessary at all. Just by positively discussing their art, recommending it, and further popularizing it, you are supporting the artist, even if you're only intending to enjoy their art alone while condemning them, because you are helping to encourage them and build their platform and give the work that they're profiting from more attention. I'm not saying your intentions don't matter. I'm not saying it's your fault for liking art you like, or that you should feel bad for doing so because it might unintentionally benefit an artist who does bad things. But it is nonetheless a fact of life, and it's something that we as consumers of art and media should try to be as aware as possible of, because it does have an impact. And in that capacity, I don't think it's at all possible to entirely separate art from artist. That's still not the only issue to be considered here though, because when it comes to that possibility, that only accounts for the consumer and whether or not they can separate the two. It's also more than worth mentioning that many feel it's impossible for the artists themselves to do so. What I mean is that if an artist holds certain views, it may be difficult, if not impossible, for them not to have those views reflected in some capacity in their work. For example, when I asked on Twitter if anyone had examples of situations in which they felt they could not support the artist's art based on something they had done, and Blasfell said racist stuff that not so coincidentally shows in their art as well, like caricatures and visual stereotypes. And in that case, the artist's racism is clearly reflected in their work, so separating them from it is impossible because they're intertwined. Similarly, again, we could return to J.K. Rowling. Her views are not, as much as we would like them to be, we, as fans, thoroughly bracketed out from Harry Potter. She is a transphobe, and there are no trans characters. The only LGBTQ rep that I'm aware of is Dumbledore, who was only confirmed as gay outside of the canon in which he's depicted. Moreover, there are also some offensive and harmful racial stereotypes within the series. There's little to no racial diversity. There's sexism, there's classism, there are a lot of problems. And with a series this detailed, in-depth, and well-developed, I struggle to believe that those problems exist without any support from Rowling's own worldviews. As Ren on Twitter said, if a creator has beliefs, no matter what, those beliefs will affect their work, even if it's done subconsciously. You cannot fully separate an artist from their work because everyone's beliefs, biases, and life experiences will affect what they make, with or without intention. I don't know if that's always the case, as the way that a racist asshole draws a butterfly might be identical to the way a non-racist non-asshole draws a butterfly, simply because the subject matter is irrelevant to their problematic beliefs. But I do nonetheless recognize the validity of the argument itself, and I do agree. To paraphrase, because I lost the screenshot, someone on Reddit basically said the following: who the artist is reflected by their work. But both the artist and their work are bigger than that reflection. And I found that to be really insightful. Harry Potter reflects J.K. Rowling's views, but it is not defined by them, and in my opinion can be enjoyed despite them because it's bigger than them. J.K. Rowling's views, similarly, are not limited by those that she chose to include in Harry Potter, though in her case, that is not complimentary. She is not limited by the reflection of her views in the series, because the series does not openly and objectively reflect the severity of the transphobia that she herself has demonstrated outside of it. In this case, the argument does not benefit the artist, but that often happens to be the case when the artist is a hateful motherfucker. But that's not even the final issue here. We've discussed whether or not the art can be separated from the artist when it comes to audience support and the reflection of the artist's ideologies, but that's really not where it ends. What about the consumer alone? Can you look at an artist's work and enjoy it, even knowing that they've done something reprehensible and unforgivable? This issue is obviously one that's completely limited to individual experience, and it's subsequently not one that I'll be commenting on directly because I can't speak for anyone but myself. But it's nonetheless worth mentioning. Many people on Twitter, when I asked, said that while they wouldn't blame others for enjoying art made by problematic artists, they themselves struggled to do so without feeling guilty. And that's a big problem when it comes to separating art from artist. On an intellectual level, we can all have varying degrees of opinions one way or the other. The art is bad if the artist is, or we should judge them separately, or somewhere in between. But how we see it that way doesn't change how we feel about it, which is something that no one can control. As Hayes Brady from the Vox interview says, at the end of the day, a work of art that speaks to you is a work of art that speaks to you. It's not a rational decision what we love. It's not possible to have loved a text and then retrospectively to unlove it. But if you discover that an author you love has done something terrible, I think it's normal to have an emotional reaction. All of that in mind, let's finally get to discussing the conclusions. So, as is a recurring theme for me, I'm on page 10 of a script and finding that I have more questions than answers about the topic at hand. I've looked into both sides and found myself agreeing with both of them, and then thinking of situations in which I felt one was wrong and the other was right. A lot of people I asked said that the whole debate to them came down to severity. If the artist did something truly heinous and unforgivable, then their art should absolutely be shunned and not supported, solely because the artist made it. If the artist's misdeed was more petty or insignificant, then their art should go without subsequent scrutiny. And I agree. But what that means is that this whole issue comes down to a matter of opinion. And opinion in the age of social media is often led by cancel culture, which makes that answer a lot less satisfying. I don't want to see art only be viewed as good if the majority of Twitter says the artist who made it is an adequate person. I also don't want to end up supporting the art of artists who are hateful and harmful. So much of this comes down to just opinion. And opinion is impossible to quantify or measure. And to have such an inconsequential answer to such an important question feels disappointing and disheartening. In the same article I referenced earlier in this video, the author consulted with 3 critics, as I mentioned. They all differed on many points, but all agreed that no scholarly theory could give one conclusive answer as to how people should, objectively, consume art in relation to the artist that made it. Swift and Hayes Brady felt that engaging critically with a work of art is completely different from endorsing the morality of the artist. Hungerford, conversely, felt that we, as consumers, should be deliberately conscious of the the artist's views and morality when consuming their art, because we should be wary of the possibility that their views could be consciously or subconsciously reflected in it. But all any of them could offer were perspectives and opinions, which is all I have to give to you too. As Jessica Kyung from the playlist puts it, in this environment, as unsatisfactory as it seems, it feels as if the only honest answer to should I separate the art from the artist is yes, except when you can't. And I mean, I'm this far into the video and I still haven't even addressed all possible contexts. Like, look at Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss, examples that multiple people on Twitter cited. People are criticizing Viv, one of the creators, for things that they've allegedly done. But does that mean that the people who are believing those allegations should also stop supporting the art? Like, Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss are not exclusively Viv's creations, and canceling the art because of the artist in this case wouldn't only affect the artist they want to cancel, but the whole team, and the whole artistic vision created by it. There's just so much nuance to every aspect of every situation when it comes to trying to separate art from artist, and it's so difficult to make any kind of definitive statement when there are so many different, complicated, controversial facets to consider. At the end of the day, I don't have any answers for you, and I told you I wouldn't, so I refuse to be blamed for my failure to provide them. All I can say is that, in my opinion, if an artist's actions have ruined their art for you, that's completely fair. But to demonize others who don't feel the same is just unfair and cruel. And I think it's also worth mentioning that even if you feel like an artist's work shouldn't be supported because of what they've done, that doesn't mean that their art or their actions should be erased or censored. As Unknown Artist on Twitter said, though, in my opinion, looking at a piece of art and being like, we should censor it because it was made by a terrible person, is a completely different thing than looking at a piece of art and being like, we shouldn't buy or consume it because we might be supporting someone's terrible actions. Erasure of an action, be it harmful, helpful, or anywhere in between, is almost never the answer, and I don't think that's any different here. We should, in my opinion, be trying to be more conscious of the art that we consume, but our scrutiny of it shouldn't censor it or stop it from existing, unless it existing is, in and of itself, doing harm. Ultimately, I don't think I can put it any better than Jessica Kyung from the playlist. The world is a dangerous, treacherous place at the moment, and those at either end, quashing the moderate, hesitant, honestly working it through voices that land somewhere in the middle of the spectrum, are part of the problem. If you're really thinking about these thorny questions and being asked for a definitive, bulletproof answer, sometimes the bravest and rightest reply of all is, I don't know. And that finally brings us to the end of the video. I hope you guys enjoyed it, or at least found it interesting or informative, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on the whole issue in the comments, because the whole topic is one that's largely defined by those thoughts and the sharing and discussion of them. But before I actually end the video and free you from the sound of my rambling, art contest updates. As you may remember, July's art contest theme was black and white, and while I normally show all of the entries individually here, I actually can't this time because there were 188 of them. I will, however, scroll through them on screen here for you guys to see, because you can't look at these and tell me this isn't a collection of some of the coolest, most creative fucking art you've ever seen. And because looking through them all is so satisfying and inspiring and incredible, I've updated my system so that all of you can look at these collections of entries anytime you want. Before this, the prior month's art would disappear from my contest site and be replaced by the current contest entries, which is still going to be the case. But if you follow the link in the description, you'll find a new site I made that hosts all of the prior month's galleries of entries forever, except April's, which was inexplicably deleted by the service that I use for contests. This also means that you can go support the artists who participated more easily, because clicking on their art will take you to the social media platform they posted it on. So I encourage you guys to go check out the artists whose July submissions are currently on screen and blowing my fucking mind, because they deserve it. Speaking of, July's contest winner by community vote is Ikgalo on Instagram with this beautiful, ominous piece. There's something about the eyes and the background that makes them so striking to me and almost reminds me of Junji Ito's work, which is the highest of compliments in my opinion because the man's a god. But the artist's style is just so eye-catching and pleasing to look at, man. Damn. Congratulations to them for winning the Vake 1060 Pro drawing tablet, and please go check out their social media, linked in the description, and give them some support. Thank you so much to not only them, but all of the other amazing artists who entered for participating. And if you didn't win, don't worry, August's contest will give you another chance to. August's contest theme is summer, and you can submit your entries by visiting duchesscelestiacontests.card.com, linked in the description, for a chance to win one of 2 prizes, thanks to this month's sponsor, SPEEDPAINT. The second place prize will be the Deco Fun XS tablet, and the first place prize will be the Deco MW drawing tablet, which is the one that I actually had the opportunity to try out for this video. and honestly, I love it. I try very hard not to pick favorites with tablet reviews, but this one is testing my willpower in that regard, and that's only slightly because it's pink and subsequently matches my entire desk and my entire life's aesthetic. It's also because it's a Bluetooth tablet, which means that while you can use it with an adapter, which also charges its battery while you do so, you can also use it completely cordlessly, and the positive difference that made for the entire drawing experience was immense. I was actually comfortable because I could move and maneuver it way more easily and save myself the back pain that normally comes with art. It also works with all Android devices, so if you have one, you don't even need a computer to use it. You guys also know how I feel about express keys by now, and it has many, which was an immediate win in my books. And I actually tried something new with them this time, which was using one to flip my canvas. I always love using them for undoing and redoing faster, but flipping the canvas with the push of one little button was an incredibly helpful, easy tool to use, and I found it very beneficial. Overall, it's a relatively small, lightweight, sleek-looking, and very pretty tablet. It's easy to set up and use, potentially one of the easiest to use actually because of the Bluetooth capabilities, and I would strongly recommend it. You can find it linked in the description alongside SPEEDPAINT's information, and while I will genuinely miss this tablet, I am nonetheless very excited to be able to give it to the first place winner. So please consider entering August contest for a chance to give it a new home. Thank you so much to SPEEDPAINT for the opportunity to try it out and extend that same opportunity to one of you, as well as for providing a second place prize of the Deco XS tablet, also linked in the description. Anyway, that's all from me. Thank you so much for watching, and special thank you as always to channel members Cafe Soleil, Joseph Solomon, Unknown Code, Abyss Reborn, and Dolph for their support, as well as patrons Batman, Kyle Lowe, Blue Swanson, This Is Totally My Name, Unity, Cora Fear, and Jamisha Walker for their support. And I'll see you in the next one.